This video provides an introduction to web services on the ServiceNow platform. Click an item to go directly to that topic, or continue watching to cover all topics. Web services allow different software systems to exchange data with each other over the Internet through Hypertext Transfer Protocol, or HTTP. In the ServiceNow platform, web services are typically used to integrate with external systems. The required System Web Services plugin is active by default in all ServiceNow instances. ServiceNow Web Services Application Program Interfaces, or APIs, adhere to REST, SOAP, and WSDL standards. Web services can be inbound or outbound. The ServiceNow platform supports both. For inbound web services, an external system sends a request, and the ServiceNow instance fulfills the request as the provider. The instance confirms that the request has been completed, or, if applicable, sends requested data to the external system. Inbound web services include direct web services, web service import sets, and scripted web services. Direct web services interact directly with tables in the ServiceNow instance, for example, allowing you to create an incident, retrieve or update a problem record, or delete a record from a customer-created table. Web service import sets interact with an import staging table and a transform map to transform data to a target table in the instance. And scripted web services are developed to meet specific needs. Sometimes these include non-table operations, such as calculations. For example, a script might get data from two different tables, make a calculation, and respond to the external system. For outbound web services, the ServiceNow instance is the consumer sending a request to an external system. The external system confirms that the request has been fulfilled, sending data if applicable. Outbound requests can be initiated in many ways, for example by scripts, such as business rules, transform maps, scripted processors, or custom web services. Outbound web services include direct requests, requests via ECCQ, and requests via midserver. Direct requests are synchronous. The script waits for a response. Requests sent via the ECCQ are asynchronous. They're put into the ECCQ and executed by worker threads. The script does not wait for a response, so they're best suited for situations where a response isn't necessary. Requests via midserver use the midserver as a proxy to reach services behind a firewall. Let's look at some typical use cases. We'll start with a simple integration where an external system uses ServiceNow as a single source of record for data to be tracked in the external system. Or perhaps the external system just needs to get data from the ServiceNow instance. Something triggers the external system to send a request for direct web services on the ServiceNow instance. The direct web service call could perform any of these operations on a record in the instance: read, create, update, or delete. In this case, a record is added to a monitoring table, and the instance responds that the operation is complete. Here's a more complex integration use case. An external system uses the ServiceNow instance as a single source of record. When a web service triggering event occurs on the external system, the ServiceNow instance gets user data from another external system, merges it with the existing data, and then creates, updates, or deletes a record on the problem table. Here are the players in this scenario. First, something on the external system, perhaps a form being submitted, triggers a web service request to the instance. In this case, the web service, import sets, is called. This web service is configured with a transform map to the problem table. The transform map defines the relationships between source fields in the incoming data and target fields in the ServiceNow table. It also includes a script that invokes an outbound web service call. So the instance sends an outbound web service request via REST or SOAP to a second external system, asking for the user data. The system provides the data, which is combined with the information from the staging table. Then the appropriate record is created or updated on the problem table. And finally, the instance notifies the external system that the task is complete. Now let's look at another use case. An external system uses the ServiceNow instance as a single source of record to create a configuration item record each time the company acquires a new laptop. To accomplish this, the ServiceNow instance needs to get some asset data from the customer's SAP system, which is behind a firewall and can't be accessed by the ServiceNow instance. First, a laptop purchase on the external system triggers a web service request that invokes a custom web service on the instance. This web service contains a script to parse incoming data and conditions to evaluate the data and take appropriate action. In this case, the required action is to get some asset data from SAP. So the instance sends an outbound web service request via REST or SOAP to that external system to get the asset data. But because the external system is behind a firewall, the instance can't make a direct call. Instead, the instance stores information about the outgoing request, and the mid server picks it up and executes the request behind the firewall. The external system responds by sending the required data, which is managed by the custom script to create a record on the configuration item table. Finally, the instance sends a task complete response to the system that initiated the request. Now that you know basically how web services work in the ServiceNow platform, let's take a quick look at the System Web Services application. The Web Service Admin or admin role is required to access this application. The base system provides modules and frameworks to handle a variety of inbound and outbound web service requests. For example, these provide default inbound web services for computer, location, notification, and user. You can use the existing ones, inserting new fields as needed, or create new ones. For outbound web services, you can use the existing SOAP messages provided here, or create new ones to meet your needs. And the same with REST messages. In addition, we have security policies and profiles, property configuration, and a module to define SOAP web services with custom script processing. The REST Getting Started module allows you to start REST API integration and explore the various REST APIs available in the system. The other videos in this series provide additional details, including step-by-step instructions on how to use system web services. For more information, please consult our product documentation or knowledge base, or ask a question in the ServiceNow community.